Hey everybody, in today's video I'm going to go over how to do a lookup in Visual Basic. Now certainly you can do a VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, index or match, combination lookup within your Excel spreadsheet, but I'm going to show you how you can do that in Visual Basic. Use that same functionality so that if you want to create your own macros or do some automation, you can do that within Visual Basic as well. So in this table, I've got a list of the most popular social media accounts, how many followers they have in millions, their names, profession, their handles. And so the idea is I'm going to take one of these values, paste it in here, and then my macro will populate this just the way a formula would. So I'm going to first go into Visual Basic. So if you don't have the Developer tab, make sure you go under Excel Options and enable this for the ribbon. And then open up Visual Basic, and what I'm going to do is create a sub-procedure called Lookup. And what I'm going to do is create some variables to start with. So one for the lookup value, which is going to be a string value. That's the value that I'm looking at from here. And I'm also going to have the result. And the result is going to be a number. It's going to be an integer, so I want to set that up properly. And I'm going to assign the lookup value, which is going to be equal to a named range called lookup value. So as opposed to specifying, cell A4 or whatever, I can just use a named range. And to create a named range on here, I just have to select that cell value and type in lookup value. And so now Excel is going to connect that lookup value to that one in there, in that range, in that cell. So even if I move the cell, Excel is going to, automatically know where that range is. Because if you code this as, A4, and the problem is you move this value as you change your spreadsheet, whatever the case may be, that value is not going to update here the way that it would with a formula. So it's the benefit of using named ranges in Visual Basic, because if you just type in A4 or something like that and you move it on here, then it's not going to go to the right place anymore. So next up, I'm going to create a variable or assign a value to the result variable. And so this is just going to be my lookup. So I'm going to look at the active sheet, and I'm going to look at the range in column B. And then I'm going to use the find method to say, okay, I'm going to look for this value, the lookup value. And then dot row so that I get the row value. And this is why it's important I set this to an integer. Okay, so now we can test this out already. If I use, let's say, message box result, then if I hit the play button on the macro, it tells me it's a value of 10, which is correct. Cristiano Ronaldo's on the 10th row on this table. So that is working properly. And another way you can actually test it out is if you do debug.print result and then hit the play button, then it'll show up down here. So there's a couple ways you can test out your macros to make sure that they're getting the desired results. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is now assign this range to this value here. Now this is not a named range, so I'll change that right now, set it to result, go back into Visual Basic, and now what I'm going to do is use the range result and assign the value of, actually not result, no, I'm going to do active sheet dot range, and then because I want to pull the value from column C, use column C, and then result, because that's going to be my row number. So now, if I hit this play button and run the macro, it should return this 531. So let's play, and sure enough, it works. So just like a normal VLOOKUP function, it does that. So, I could copy another name here, paste, go back into here, hit the play button, updates. Now, obviously, it's a bit tedious. You don't be clicking the play button all the time. So one thing you'll probably want to do is either assign some shortcuts, or better yet, just insert a button, a shape. And you can make a button really simple. Just insert a shape, create it however you like. Edit text, let's say lookup, and then I can adjust this. And now once my button's ready to go, right now it doesn't do anything, but if I right click and select assign macro, I'm going to select that one, the lookup, and now it's there. So now when you hover over it, you see now I have that clicking icon, that finger icon where I click on it and it does something. Right now it doesn't look like it did anything because the value is still the same. So I copy Dwayne Johnson in there. Paste. Hit the lookup. 356. So it updates automatically, right? So it's pretty, well, it doesn't update, it automatically updates once you hit the button. So there is that still manual step in there. But you can see that now it works from Visual Basic without having to use a VLOOKUP here. And so the value is essentially hard-coded. Now, there is another way you could do this as well. And a way that you can access just all your functions in Excel. And so I'm going to create another sub procedure here. This time I was going to call it VLOOKUP. And so we can actually simplify all this. I can just set the result value equal to just using the VLOOKUP function. So I can do worksheet function dot. Once I press the dot, you'll see the functions that I have access to. One of them is VLOOKUP. Now the downside of this is it just tells you that there are arguments in here, but it doesn't tell me what they are. So you have to know what your arguments need to be. So the first one I know is going to be the lookup value. So I can't reference this variable here because that's a different sub procedure. But what I can do is I can just reference the named range here. So range lookup value. So I skip the part of assigning a variable. And then within my range, or the range that I want to search in, it's going to be columns B and C. Set that range. And then I'm going to set the next argument to 2 because I want the second column within that range. So just like a normal VLOOKUP function, and set it to false for an exact match. Hit OK. Now if I run this one, again, it'll look the same because it hasn't really changed. But if I click assign macro here, change that to the VLOOKUP, and now let's say I'll copy Taylor Swift in there. Paste. And now if I click this button now, 356 changes to 239. So it's still working the exact same way. Really, it's just a matter of preference. Obviously, it might be a bit cleaner to set up these variables and book them separately, but obviously you can try to do it all in one shot with just one line, utilizing that worksheet function. So by using worksheet function, you'll have access to the functions that you can use in your Excel spreadsheet. So if you don't necessarily want to do a lookup this way, you can still have access to VLOOKUP through Visual Basic that way. And obviously the main advantage of doing it within here is if it's part of a larger macro or something like that. It obviously would be a bit pointless if you're going to click a button to do a lookup when you could do that with a simple formula. But I just wanted to show you the different options you have available if you do need to do a lookup in Visual Basic.